Imagine you're crouched in a trench. It's July 1915. You've survived artillery barrages. You've survived machine gun fire. You've survived gas attacks. You think you've seen everything this war can throw at you. And then you hear it. A hiss. A low, mechanical roar. And around the corner of your trench comes something that no soldier in modern history had ever faced before. Fire. Liquid fire. Moving toward you like a living thing. Not an explosion. Not a shell. Fire that chases you. And here's the thing, the heat alone wasn't even the most lethal part. There was something far worse happening inside those trenches that nobody talks about. Something that killed men who weren't even touched by the flame. Today we're going inside the full, horrifying history of the flamethrower, from its ancient origins, to the trenches of World War I, to the caves of Iwo Jima, and we're going to bust open one of the biggest Hollywood myths about this weapon while we're at it. Stay with me. Because this story is darker, and stranger, than you think. Most people assume flamethrowers are a modern invention. Something born from the industrial carnage of the 20th century. And in a sense, they're right, but the idea of projecting fire as a weapon is ancient. The Byzantine Empire, as far back as the 7th century, used a device called a siphon, a pressurized pump that sprayed a liquid incendiary mixture known as Greek fire. Sailors on enemy ships would watch in horror as liquid flame landed on the water around them, and kept burning. On water. It was psychological devastation as much as physical destruction. But here's the key distinction historians make, and it matters. Those ancient devices were largely pneumatic. Manual pumps. Mechanical pressure. Brutal, but primitive. The modern flamethrower operates on a completely different principle. Compressed gas, nitrogen or carbon dioxide, acts as a propellant, forcing a liquid fuel through a nozzle, where a pilot flame ignites at the moment it exits. It's precise. It's engineered. And it's far, far more controllable as a weapon of war. So who figured that out? A German engineer named Richard Fiedler. In 1901, Fiedler submitted designs to the German War Office. That same year, he filed German patent number 161262. The German army began testing prototypes by 1905, and they called it the Flammenwerfer, flamethrower. For the next decade, this weapon sat largely in the shadows of military development. Tested. Refined. Waiting. And then, the First World War began, and everything changed. But here's what you have to understand before we get to the battlefield. Military commanders in 1915 weren't looking for a weapon to cause more casualties. They were looking for a weapon to do something very specific. To break a problem that was slowly bleeding both sides to death. So what was that problem? And why was fire the answer? By mid-1915, the Western Front had locked itself into one of the most brutal stalemates in military history. Trenches stretched across Belgium and France for hundreds of miles. Artillery barrages killed thousands, and yet, the lines barely moved. Charging across open ground was a death sentence. Both sides had dug in so deep that conventional assault was practically suicidal. German commanders needed something that could shock the British out of their defensive positions. Something that didn't just kill, but terrified. On July 30, 1915, at a location called Hooge, near Ypres in Belgium, German Stoßtruppen, stormtroopers, deployed the Flammenwerfer in combat for the very first time in modern warfare. The effect was immediate. And catastrophic. British soldiers who had trained for bullets, gas, and shrapnel had no mental framework for what they were seeing. Liquid fire erupting from a hose, arcing through the air, landing in the trenches around them. The lines broke. Not just because men were burning, but because of something far more primal than pain. The fear of burning alive. And this is where the history gets deeply uncomfortable. Because the psychological damage of this weapon often outpaced the physical damage. Soldiers described a unique terror, a panic that was different from anything else they experienced in the war. And that panic was exactly what the weapon was designed to create. Now, the Kleinflammenwerfer, the small version used in these early deployments, had serious limitations. It was heavy. Its effective range was only about 20 to 30 meters. And it had roughly 2 minutes of total burst duration before it was spent. 2 minutes doesn't sound like much. But in a trench? In a bunker? 2 minutes is an eternity. So we know soldiers feared this weapon more than almost anything else on the battlefield. But here's something that almost nobody talks about, something buried in the medical records of World War I. The flame itself wasn't always the thing that killed you. So what was? Here's the detail that genuinely disturbed me when I went through the historical record. When a flamethrower was deployed in an enclosed space, a bunker, a dugout, a section of trench, the intense heat had a secondary effect that was arguably more lethal than the fire itself. It consumed the oxygen. The combustion process in a confined space would rapidly deplete available oxygen and produce carbon monoxide. Men who were never directly touched by the liquid fuel, who were crouched around corners, shielded from the flame, were suffocating. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Asphyxiation. You didn't have to be hit to die. You just had to be in the same enclosed space. This is why flamethrower teams became so devastatingly effective against fortified positions. And it's also why the weapon crossed a psychological line that other arms of war hadn't. There was something about fire, about the visibility of it, the sound, the smell, that made it uniquely horrifying to the soldiers who faced it. And that horror had a direct consequence for the men who operated the weapon. Flamethrower operators were despised. By every side. If a Flammenwerfer crew was captured, they were frequently executed on the spot. Not taken prisoner. Executed. The weapon made you a priority target, not just for enemy gunners, but for every enemy soldier who saw you on the battlefield. The men who carried the tanks knew what their capture meant. And yet they kept walking forward. Think about the psychological weight of that for a moment. Now, World War I established the weapon's terrifying potential. But it was the Second World War, and specifically one island in the Pacific, that pushed the flamethrower to its absolute operational limits. And revealed something about modern warfare that commanders hadn't fully anticipated. What happens when your enemy builds underground,